representing all of hockey with great distinction for 5 decades, number 9.
If you're going to make a protocol hockey player, who would you pick? You'd pick Gordie Howe.
Well, you can see why Gordie Howe is said to be the greatest player in the history of the National Hockey League.
But the best all-around player that can play any position and probably go to goal is Gordie Howe.
And Gordie Howe, they call him Mr. Hockey.
Gordie Howe was hockey.
The great sport of hockey, honor Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe.
Many NHL All-Star Game records to his credit.
Back when some of us were children, he was already a man who looked like our dads, complete with the receding hairline, a hockey legend in late career. The glory days of the 50s, the Detroit dynasty, already far behind him. There's old Gordie Howe.
I watch him just thread the needle, and there, that says it all.
And now, we're the parents, the grandparents, who watched him with our parents and then with our children and our grandchildren through all of those incarnations still to come. In the WHA, back in the NHL, playing with his boys, playing against the Russians, playing alongside Wayne Gretzky, who idolized him.
The greatest one of all, Gordie Howe, he's just still the greatest in my mind and everybody else's mind.
How did he do that? How did he mess with time?
And Howe was in the right place at the right time to score Detroit's second goal.
Gordie Howe's story became the hockey story, really. The origin myth that fuels an entire sport. Born in the poetic prairie crossroads of Floral, Saskatchewan, skating on God's own ice, on winter mornings unbearably cold, big and shy, with a disarming smile, a small-town boy and a hockey genius, born right out of the land.
I know if I can live up to even 10% of it, I'd be a very happy man.
He played his first NHL game in 1946. The war had just ended. Mackenzie King was Prime Minister. It would be 6 years before a game was shown on television. He played his last in 1980. His last in the NHL, that is. There would be later cameos to make a buck and prove a point about Father Time. Still, Gordie Howe exited professional hockey in a world unimaginable when he entered.
An ambidextrous stick-hander, Howe retains possession of the puck as long as he can. Gordie Howe scores on his blistering backhand shot.
To fully appreciate Howe, perhaps you had to have seen him in his youth. When he jockeyed with the Rocket for supremacy, when he fell into the boards and almost died, when, by the beginning of the 1960s, it was already the consensus that he was the finest hockey player who had ever lived. He had great hands, great vision, great strength, and a mean streak a mile wide that belied his off-ice sweetness, that lurked behind the aw shucks grin.
Well, I'm just stretching my luck. I hope to put in 20. I've always admired that mark, and if I can achieve it, I'll be a very happy man, and I'll be #1 in the pension field.
The stuff he did in those much nastier days, not just with his elbow, but with his fists and with his stick, would have got him suspended now, over and over again, as his hockey-playing sons admit.
I signed him to his first contract, and he come up in the afternoon. He was walking up in front of my office, and I finally said, "Come on in, son. What's the matter with you? Aren't you satisfied with your contract?" And, you know, he talks like a Texan.
Howe was infamously exploited by his employers. His pure love of playing the game was used against him. It wasn't until he walked away from his first retirement, walked away from his phony front office job with the Red Wings, walked away with his wife and partner and business brain, Colleen, to join his sons in a rebel league, that the yes sir, no sir guy finally bucked the system. It was about time.
And from the Hartford Whalers, representing all of hockey with great distinction for 5 decades, number 9.
The freshest memory, for most of us now, is of the hockey-playing granddad, skating in slow motion, barely cruising down the ice, yet somehow always winding up where he had to be, always in position to score a goal or set one up, and always, even as a graybeard, ready to deliver a subtle reminder to anyone who believed otherwise that danger lurked, though he'd apologize afterwards.
But now comes back to score one of the greatest goals of the series, a stick-handling masterpiece.
Mr. Hockey. That always seemed more like a brand exercise than anything else, and it wasn't really necessary. Gordie. That was enough, all by itself. A hockey player's name. The hockey player's name.
You know, I don't really have a definitive answer to why I picked Gordie Howe, other than he seemed to be the best player in the NHL at that time. I was a Red Wing fan as a kid. My first great Christmas present was a Gordie Howe jersey when I was 4 years old, Detroit Red Wings. And he became my guy, and whenever he was on TV, in those days there wasn't a lot of games on TV, but whenever Detroit was on, I got a chance to watch Gordie Howe. I sat there the whole time, and of course the rest is history in the sense that I got to meet him when I was 10 years old, and that just took it to another level. I remember the first couple pictures was just sort of Gordie and I, me standing beside Gordie, and somebody said, let's get a hockey stick in there. I think the reason they put it in there was just to show, you know, who's this kid beside him? You know, what is it, and what is he about? By having the hockey stick in there sort of legitimized that, okay, it's 2 hockey players, one a kid and the other Gordie Howe. And I think that's how the picture became what it did and became iconic. My favorite moment happened in the locker room. I was a 17-year-old kid, and I was playing in the All-Star game, and I was going to center Gordie and Mark Howe. And I remember sitting there before the game, and I was so nervous. And I turned to Gordie, and Gordie had his feet on his stick, and he had his eyes back, and he had his eyes closed, and I hit him, and I said, Gordie, I'm really nervous about this game tonight. And he looked at me and he goes, so am I. I remember thinking, you're almost sleeping. What do you mean you're nervous? And so I always remember that. It was such a great moment, and something I'll never forget.
Thank heavens Rocket Richard had set a goal for somebody to break, and I said that's what records are made for, really. Somebody to come along and do better.
I never set out to say, oh yeah, I'm going to break Gordie Howe's records. That was never my intention. I got lucky and got to the right team and the right players and the right era. But as I was breaking some of the records, I really felt it was important for me to at least ask him to be around for it and to be there with it. And I wanted him to know how much respect I had for him as a person and as a player. But secondly, the game has changed so much from when he played to when I was breaking his records, and I wanted him to understand that, listen, I understand this is a different era, that I came around at the right time. And don't look at this as that I'm breaking your records, just look at this as the game has changed. And that's sort of the attitude we had with each other.
I'd like to say in all honesty, I've been looking forward to this day. I've been spending the last 10 days with Wayne, and I thought I knew him before, but he's just grown an inch taller than what he was in my mind. A super young man, a great hockey player who shares in everything he does, and it's really nice for me to be sharing those honors with Wayne last week. Congratulations, Wayne.
As Gordie pointed out, I've been really excited the last week. Life is not a whole lot of fun without family. My family's been great to me. Of course, the greatest one of all, Gordie Howe. He's just still the greatest in my mind and everybody else's mind. Thank you all very much. I still have that great deal of respect for him as a person and as a player. We became better friends, and I got a chance to play against him. I got a chance to play with him in an All-Star game. I got a chance to play against him in a great All-Star game in Detroit and see him being honored the way he should be. And there was always a respect level that I had for him. He was always there whenever I needed some advice or wanted to talk with him. He never was critical ever of the game itself or any players, and I just always learned a great deal from him.
And as much as you can admire him while watching him, you really don't know how much talent that kid's got until you play with him. If he thinks that he wants to be like Gordie Howe, God, I'd love to have some of those moves.
The biggest lesson I learned from him was that each and every game is important, in the sense that he understood that every night somebody was going to come and pay to watch Gordie Howe play, and that he had to play as good as he could play every game. That might be the one and only time somebody got to watch him. And I think he always told me that somebody's going to drive in and watch you play that's never seen you and maybe never will get that chance again, and I always took that advice.
Not only is it a wonderful living for us, we owe those fans a lot, and we should give our all while we're out there.
At 17, Gordie started his career with the Omaha Knights, a minor league club in Nebraska, where he officially became a pro. Although it was the start of an epic career, it was a humble beginning.
My salary wasn't anything to get excited about. It was $2,350, $50 for signing. So I went down there, and I sat in a bench for quite a while. And we're playing in, I think it was Fort Worth, Texas, and my roommate got in a fight. And he started actually skating away from the guy. I got mad. I said, "Don't run from it." God, it looks so bad. So you get beaten to lay down on the ice, do something, but don't run. So I jumped over the boards and I took the guy on. And after I served my 5 minutes, I came off and Tommy Ivan said, "What's the matter with you, young man? Don't you like him?" I said, "I don't like anybody out there." I never missed another shift. So that kind of molded me into the guy I was.
In 1946, Gordie broke into the NHL with the Detroit Red Wings. He didn't take the league by storm in his rookie season, netting 7 goals in 58 games, but his sophomore campaign would change everything. Under Wings coach Tommy Ivan, Gordie was teamed up with Sid Abel and Ted Lindsay to form the production line, one of the most prolific scoring trios in NHL history.
The nice thing about it, we all could score, we could all shoot the puck, also all of us could make plays, and you might hear about it, but it's so funny, we read one another extremely well.
He would win 4 Stanley Cups with the Red Wings between 1950 and 1955. He enjoyed some of his most productive years in the NHL while soaking up wisdom from his teammates.
Being the youngest guy on the team a lot, you just sit there and I use the old phrase, you keep 2 eyes open, 1 mouth shut, you do fine. And I listened, and I learned a ton about hockey, and I think that helped.
During his career, Howe set NHL records in virtually every category. Most goals, most assists, most points, most Hart trophies as league MVP with 6. But beyond his skill and toughness, it was Gordie's longevity that made him a legend. He had 1 season with more than 100 points in 68-69, but his consistency was astounding. Gordie recorded 22 NHL seasons with 20 or more goals, a feat still not matched to this day. Gordie initially retired in 1971, but it didn't take. 2 years later, he was back in the WHA. And when the WHA merged with the NHL in 1979, Gordie was back in the NHL at the age of 51.
Now over the line to his father, son to father, backhand shot, they score!
They were a little concerned about it's the NHL, you might get hurt. They can't get any tougher. The respect will be there. It's going to be easier for me. So I started the season, I started very well. I had 10 goals immediately.
In total, Howe played 26 seasons in the NHL. He is still the oldest player to play in an NHL game. He holds the NHL record for most games played with 1,767. He retired with 801 goals and 1,850 points, despite an NHL career that spanned 5 decades, or perhaps because of it. Gordie never lost his passion for the game he loved.
That's the way I felt. I've always felt that way, that the people have shown their love for me, and the only way you can repay it is to go and give 100%. There's no game I ever come off the ice with the total knowledge that's the best I had.
In our lives, we feel that Gordie's greatness is surpassed mainly by the fact that he is such a wonderful husband and father.
Leave that on.
You want to leave that on? You want to hear that repeated, do you, Gordy? You really think that's what you meant? I mean about your achievements, not about you being a wonderful husband.
Oh,
you
that's
know
part
that,
I like.
right? You like that.
It was a love affair. Yes, it was. And they were very different. Colleen was brought up here in Detroit, an only child in her family. And Gordy was brought up in the Depression in Western Canada with a large family. But she had a great deal of respect for his mother and father, and she treated them wonderfully. And she just loved that large family and family relationship, and that's what she held together in their family.
Gordy relied on her entirely, and she's years ahead of her time, as we said before. In my opinion, she should be in the Hall of Fame. She represented Gordy and the boys fabulously well. She did good contracts, she was fair, she stuck to her word.
There is a business side to everybody's life, and he was lucky that Colleen said, I'll volunteer to get in there, and I may have to be the bad guy in some of these contract disputes, but I'm willing to do that. And I think she did a pretty good job for him over the years.
Mom was the backbone of the family, and she ran everything, and she's the one who was mostly brought us kids up and taught us from right and wrong. And the relationship she had with Dad, they just did everything together their whole lives.
The world of sport has never seen the likes of a Gordie Howe.
Gordie Howe for me has been bigger than life.
You know, what can I say? Mr. Hockey, and he deserves it.
Size, strength, ability, coordination, everything about him was the perfect hockey player at that time.
I'm Gordie Howe. I play for Detroit in the fastest, toughest league of any sport in the world, the National Hockey League. It's a league where you can never afford to let down for a second. It's a game where every minute is full of tense action and every player is as good as you are on a given night.
Likely some of the greatest games that I was ever involved in, playing head-on-head against him. You always had to be aware of him out on the ice. Wasn't flashy, skated in straight lines, but got the job done and was tougher than a night in jail.
It's always struck me how humble he was, and you know, by the time I met him already in the NHL, I always had that little fear that maybe, you know, he's going to ignore me or not acknowledge me a little bit. But Gordie was nothing like that at all.
And from the Hartford Whalers, representing all of hockey with great distinction for 5 decades, number 9.
It was the 1980 All-Star game, and he was playing in Hartford. And I got a little bit of criticism because the coaches could add to the roster. So we added Gordie.
Howe takes it away. From Watson, centers to Cloutier, scores! Cloutier, set up by Gordie Howe.
But the ovation he got at the Joe Louis Arena that night, I think it was over 8 or 10 minutes. I mean, it was just on and on because he had finally come back to Detroit. That would be one of the best memories I ever had.
When I played in Sweden, I wore number 9, and when I came over there, I asked for number 9 because I didn't know I didn't know anything better. But one of the trainers took me out and pointed up in the rafters at the Joe and said, you know, number 9 is hanging up there, so that's not going to happen. And I told Gordie that story years later, and he said, well, if you would have asked, I would have given that number. So he's always fun to be around.
I'll never forget shaking Gordie Howe's hand and just feeling his hand just envelope mine.
Big hands, very strong, very strong, and you can only imagine how strong he was on the ice when he played, and I know he was a complete player and what a superman. It's just incredible for all of us to get a chance to sit down and talk with him.
I'll tell you a story. I'm coaching Colorado, and him and Robbie Ftorek, I remember, killed a penalty for Hartford, and he was 50-some years old. He was absolutely beautiful at 50-some years old playing. And I had to get, even though they beat us, I went around and I saw him and I said, Gordie, I've never talked to you before, but I just want you to know you were absolutely fantastic out there. What you can say, he's Mr. Hockey.
Here's Gordie Howe going in to
A family man, great hockey player, obviously. Part of his professional life he liked the most was playing with the boys and being a family and playing as a family.
They were playing, I think it was in Quebec City, and they always called him Gordy. Mark and Marty always called him Gordy. And they were on the ice, and apparently, and I don't know which one it was Mark or Marty, was in the open, and he yelled for a pass, and he yelled, "Dad!" You know, and of course Gordy put the pass on the tape.
I don't mind at any time when a youngster come up and asks for an autograph, but when you're walking through to a restaurant and somebody stops you and asks you when you're standing up full view of everybody, that embarrasses me. And if maybe some people think you're a little snobbish, but I don't actually go for the hero stuff on my behalf, because this is a job in my mind. I'm going to do the very best I can.
The way he played, I mean, you know, he played the game. Today, they wouldn't allow it. I have so much respect for him and his whole family and, you know, what he's done for the game. You never see him not stopping to talk to somebody or interacting. I mean, just a spokesman. All of Gordy is something special. And when you say hockey, you think of Gordie Howe. We had lost a game in Detroit one night, and he came down after the room and he comes in my office and he says, "Coach, they scored a goal. One of your guys was laughing on the bench." I said, "Oh," I said, "you want to?" No, don't worry about that. I already got that looked after." To me, that stuff's important. That's what Original Six is all about, is those people still care about what happens on a daily basis.
We're not alibi, and we tried our best, and they say whenever you try your best, if you don't succeed, blame no one, just give credit to the others.
When you think of Gordie Howe, you think of Mr. Hockey. He was emblematic of everything that the game represented in terms of skill, physicality, passion for the game.
The Gordie Howes of life are what made hockey what it is. The kids, every kid playing in the province of Quebec in those days wanted to be Maurice Richard. Every kid playing in the province of Saskatchewan wanted to be Gordie Howe, because he was from Saskatoon. And that's the way it should be.
It's nice to be young, you know, but if I had in my life to live over again, I wouldn't change one bit.